following exhibit was shown in Washington, D.C., and includes a completed model of St. Peter's Cathedral, demonstrating various geodesic domes linking polyhedrons and architecture. An additional part of the curriculum which may follow the polyhedron unit, if time permits, is an architecture unit. In order to reinforce as well as extend the understanding of three-dimensionality in a hands-on environment, architecture is studied. Having completed an extensive topic on polyhedrons, students understand the effects of natural geometry. Architecture now places the power of controlling and redesigning space into the hands of the students. Students' preliminary study includes a model in OakTag using tab inserts and glue. This helps the student to establish relevant design aspects as a basis for flow of space. As a part of this preliminary study, the student will study rooftops. Having mastered this project, students are able to transfer concepts learned from polyhedrons. Students will execute a final foam board construction, which they design using concepts studied from known architects. Included in these contemporary design models are various physics applications. The following clip from Sunday morning on CBS gives insight.
All the creations of Frank O. Gehry.
I was right in front of the goal. If they'd have passed it to me, I would have gotten it in.
Let him idolize Wayne Gretzky. Students of architecture call Gehry the modern Frank Lloyd Wright.
I mean, I'm a sailor, so I love sails and wings and stuff. And I've always been looking for a sense of movement in my buildings. How do you justify spending money to make a building look like it's moving? I think it's, the only thing I can come up with is the world is moving really fast, and we've got to express our time in some way, and this may be one way.
These days in Frank Gehry's Los Angeles office, a small army of associates is at work on buildings that are changing the face of cities all over the world. The American Center in Paris, France. The Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao, Spain. An office building that will stand, or maybe dance, next door to Václav Havel's house in the grand old city of Prague. The Czechs call it Fred and Ginger.
I have to come down every once in a while and convince myself that it's good again. Yeah.
And then there's the $50 million Disney Concert Hall for downtown Los Angeles.
Think it's going to look like it's moving?
Its sail-like walls of stone will be carved with the help of the latest computer technology.
So when the contractor says, how do you do that? We tell them how many pieces of stone, what shape of each piece, where they go, like painting by the numbers. It's a way of controlling the cost of the stone. I'm a control freak, so I know that if I go out to bid with a building that's going to go way over budget, it ain't going to get built. So I have to control it. And by controlling the process, it gives me the freedom to do some of the things. I spend the money in the shapes and the forms and the feeling of the room and spaces rather than in fancy, goofy details.
Frank Gehry was interested in spaces and in art. The warehouse he transformed into offices for the advertising firm Chiat Day has room for art and for a car and for a basketball hoop. The conference room looks like a giant fish. An artist friend, Klaus Oldenburg, supplied the binoculars that became part of the Venice headquarters of Chiat Day. The Weissman Art Museum at the University of Minnesota was dedicated on a cold day last fall. Frank Gehry missed the ceremony because he cut his head in a fall on the ice.
It looks like I know what I'm doing, doesn't it?
But he did make it into town in time for a hockey game between his firm's team, the Fog, and the University of Minnesota Architecture School.
I would like to do the windows over again about 6 more times.
And he did take a look at his building with Herbert Muschamp, chief architecture critic for the New York Times.
It seemed appropriate to make an art museum that stood out. In fact, the president asked me, said, don't make another brick lump for us.
Gary certainly did not make another brick lump. Rather, a fairy tale castle of stainless steel that reflects the changing moods of the Mississippi and the cold Minnesota sky. Some of the students call it the tin can.
This is wonderful. Congratulations. I think people think it's willful, that you're kidding them, that you're putting them on, that you're trying to stick it in their eye. Somebody asked me that. Was I sticking it to Minneapolis? And, you know, if they saw the amount of work I did and the evolution of the idea and the previous work and what came after, they would understand. They wouldn't see that.
The following excerpt is taken from Howard Gardner's Frame of Mind, published 1983. Inasmuch as both logical, mathematical, and spatial intelligence arise from the child's action upon the world, one may ask whether they in fact entail different forms of intelligence. Even Piaget seems to have sensed that they did. He contests, the advent of concrete operations at the start of school marks an important turning point in the child's mental development. The child has now become capable of far more active manipulation of images and objects in the spatial realm. Through reversible mental operations, he can now appreciate how objects look to someone situated elsewhere. Here we encounter the well-known phenomenon of decentration, where the child can indicate what a scene would look like to someone seated in another part of the room, or how an object would look if rotated in space. Yet this variety of spatial intelligence is still restricted to concrete situations and events. Only during the formal operation era, at the time of adolescence, can the youth deal with the idea of abstract spaces, or with formal rules governing space. Thus, geometry comes to be appreciated by the adolescent, or by the mathematically precocious child, who is newly able to relate the world of figural images to propositional statements, and to reason about the implications of various kinds of transformations. There have recently been studies of the child's broader spatial understanding, and these yield intriguing findings. It turns out that children of age 3 or less can retrace a route that they knew motorically, but have difficulty anticipating what sorts of things they will encounter in regions that they have not themselves visited, but about which they have accrued some independent knowledge. For example, from verbal descriptions or from a visit to a neighboring location. Representing this knowledge poses a whole host of challenges. Even older children have difficulty in capturing in some other format their intuitive knowledge of layout. What proves most difficult for school-age children is to coordinate their knowledge of a spatial layout, as gained from a number of disparate experiences, into a single, overall organized framework. Put differently, the children may know their way around many areas in their neighborhood or town, and in fact never fail to find what they are looking for. Yet they will often lack the capacity to provide a map, a sketch, or an overall verbal account of the relationship among several spots. Representing their piecemeal knowledge in another format or symbol system proves an elusive part of spatial intelligence. After visiting the Frank Lloyd Wright exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art in March 1994, an 8th grade student at the New York